The rain pounded against the windows of Sarah's tiny apartment as she stared at her laptop screen in disbelief. Another rejection email from a potential employer. 6 months of searching, and still nothing. The notification sound from her phone cut through the steady drumbeat of rain. An email from an address she didn't recognize, davenport@globalinvestments.com. Sarah's finger hovered over the delete button. Another scam. Had to be. But curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it. Dear Ms. Clark, we are attempting to process a payment of $25,000 to your account. Please confirm your banking details within 24 hours to complete this transaction. She laughed bitterly. These scammers were getting more creative. $25,000. Yeah, right. She took a screenshot to share with her friends later and hit delete. On Friday evening, as Sarah was walking home from her part-time waitressing job, a sleek black car pulled alongside her. The window rolled down to reveal a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. Ms. Clark, Sarah Clark, his voice was deep, authoritative. Sarah clutched her pepper spray inside her pocket. Who's asking? William Davenport. I've been trying to reach you regarding an important payment. The email scammer in the flesh. This was new. Look, I don't know what kind of operation you're running, but I'm not interested. Please leave me alone before I call the police. The man looked genuinely confused. I assure you, this is no scam. Your uncle, Richard Clark, was my business partner for 15 years. Before his passing, he left specific instructions regarding an inheritance to be paid to you. Sarah froze. Her uncle Rich. She hadn't seen him since she was 12. Her father had mentioned he'd passed away last year, but they hadn't been close. I don't believe you, she said flatly. If this were legitimate, a lawyer would have contacted me. William Davenport smiled patiently. Your uncle was unconventional. He specified that I personally ensure the funds reached you. He also said you might be suspicious. That's why I brought this. He handed her an envelope through the window. Inside was a photograph of her as a child, sitting on Uncle Rich's shoulders at the state fair. She remembered that day. He'd bought her cotton candy and won her a stuffed elephant she'd kept for years. How did you get this? She whispered. From Richard's personal effects. There's a letter as well. The handwriting was unmistakable. The same looping script from the birthday cards he'd sent until she was 16. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I've moved on to whatever comes next. I wasn't the best at keeping in touch, but I've watched your journey from afar. Your determination reminds me of myself at your age. I've instructed Will to deliver this payment personally. He's the only person I trust completely. The money is yours, no strings attached. Use it wisely. With love, Uncle Rich. Sarah looked up at the man in the car, tears welling in her eyes. I don't understand. Why 25,000? William Davenport chuckled. 25,000. No, Ms. Clark. Your uncle left you $2.5 million. Sarah nearly dropped the envelope. That's impossible. Richard was quite successful, though he kept a low profile. We built global investments together. Your uncle owned 40% of a company currently valued at just over $6 billion. But why me? We barely knew each other. He spoke of you often. Said you had his spirit. Your father and he had their differences, but Richard always kept tabs on you. He was particularly impressed when you turned down that art school scholarship to care for your mother during her illness. Sarah's legs felt weak. How could he possibly know about that? As I said, he kept tabs. Now, would you consider joining me for dinner? There's much to discuss regarding your inheritance, including several properties and investment portfolios. Sarah stared at the man, suspicion still lingering. I should contact a lawyer first. Absolutely. Here's my card with the company details. Feel free to verify everything. I'll wait. 2 hours later, after frantic Google searches and a call to the company's official number confirming William Davenport's identity as CEO, Sarah sat across from him at an upscale restaurant she could never have afforded on her own. Why did you try so hard to find me? She asked, still processing everything. You could have just sent a formal letter. William swirled the wine in his glass thoughtfully. Your uncle was my best friend. His final request was that I personally ensure you received your inheritance. Richard was concerned you'd think it was a scam if it came through traditional channels. Well, he was right about that, Sarah admitted. Besides, William continued, I was curious to meet the young woman Richard spoke so highly of. There was something in his eyes when he looked at her, a warmth, an interest that went beyond professional obligation. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest that she quickly dismissed. Over the following weeks, William helped Sarah navigate her new financial reality. He insisted on teaching her about investments personally, spending hours explaining concepts she'd never encountered. Their meetings grew longer, often extending into dinners where conversation shifted from business to personal interests. 1 month after their first meeting, Sarah realized she was falling for him. It was absurd. He was nearly 15 years her senior, impossibly wealthy, and far too sophisticated for someone like her. Yet she couldn't deny the chemistry between them. What she didn't know was that William was experiencing the same struggle. He'd been captivated by her intelligence and authenticity from their first meeting. In a world where people constantly sought his wealth and influence, Sarah had initially rejected both. He found himself inventing reasons to see her, extending their meetings, sharing parts of himself he'd kept guarded for years. On a rainy evening much like the one when she'd received his first email, William confessed his feelings. This is completely unprofessional, he admitted, and possibly inappropriate given how we met, but I find myself thinking about you constantly. Your uncle would probably haunt me for this, but I need to know if there's any chance you might feel something for me too. Sarah's heart raced. I do. But this can't work. We are from different worlds. Different worlds that collided because you thought I was a scammer, he reminded her with a smile. Perhaps that collision was meant to happen. Their relationship blossomed despite Sarah's initial reservations. She insisted on making her own way, using her inheritance to finish her degree and start a non-profit arts program for underprivileged children rather than simply living off her wealth. William admired her independence, often saying it was her spirit, not her inheritance, that had captivated him. On their 1-year anniversary, he proposed at the same restaurant where they'd had their first dinner. I spent 15 years helping your uncle build a financial empire, William said as he knelt before her. But in just 1 year with you, I've built something far more valuable, a life filled with purpose and love. Sarah looked into the eyes of the man she'd once mistaken for a scammer and saw her future. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. What neither of them knew was that from whatever plane of existence he now occupied, Richard Clark was smiling. His final investment had yielded returns beyond anything money could buy: genuine happiness for the two people he'd cared about most. The rain outside had stopped, and moonlight streamed through the restaurant windows, illuminating their embrace. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most suspicious emails could lead to the most beautiful destinations. But their story was just beginning. 3 months after their engagement, Sarah discovered something that would shake the foundations of everything they'd built together. While organizing her uncle's personal papers, she found a sealed envelope with her name on it, marked to be opened only after my death, and after you've met William. With trembling hands, she broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph and a brief note. The photo showed a much younger Richard and William, arms around each other's shoulders, standing in front of a rundown apartment building. The note simply read, "He doesn't know I planned this. He thinks meeting you was his idea. Forgive an old man's manipulation, I just couldn't bear the thought of the two people I loved most being alone. You're more alike than you know." Sarah sat frozen, the implications hitting her like waves. Had her uncle orchestrated their entire relationship from beyond the grave? Was what she and William had real, or just the result of careful manipulation? She confronted William that evening, showing him the photograph and note. His shock appeared genuine as he sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. "I swear I had no idea," he said, looking devastated. "Richard never mentioned you until his final instructions regarding the inheritance. At least, not that I recall." But as they talked through the timeline, memories surfaced. William remembered Richard casually mentioning his niece over the years, showing him occasional photos, telling stories of her determination. Seeds planted so subtly that William hadn't recognized them as such. "Does this change how you feel?" William asked finally, vulnerability naked in his eyes. "Knowing that meeting me wasn't entirely chance." Sarah considered this carefully. "The meeting may have been arranged, but everything that followed was our choice. Unless you've been following some script I don't know about." William's laugh held relief. "If I had a script, I wouldn't have been so nervous asking you to dinner the first time." Their wedding proceeded as planned, but with a special chair left empty in the front row, a single rose placed upon it. In her vows, Sarah included a line that made William's eyes glisten, "Thank you for being the payment my uncle knew I needed, not in currency, but in love." 5 years later, their first child was born, a boy they named Richard, after the mastermind who had brought them together. As they stood over his crib, William whispered, "Your uncle would be proud." Sarah smiled. "He's probably up there congratulating himself on his most successful investment." Their life together wasn't perfect. They faced challenges like any couple: disagreements about business decisions, adjustment to parenthood, finding balance between their individual passions and shared goals. But they faced each obstacle together, stronger for the unusual way they'd found each other. What had begun as a suspected scam had become the greatest fortune either could have imagined. And somewhere, Uncle Rich was undoubtedly pleased with the interest his final investment had accrued, a family built on love, trust, and the occasional well-intentioned deception. As their story spread among friends and family, it became known as the inheritance matchmaking scheme, a tale retold at gatherings and celebrations. Sarah often reflected on how close she'd come to deleting that first email, how easily she could have walked away from William's car that rainy evening. One misstep, one moment of complete distrust, and everything would have been different. It was a reminder she carried with her. Sometimes the most suspicious opportunities concealed the greatest blessings. On their 10th anniversary, William surprised Sarah with a recreation of their first meeting: a black car pulling alongside her as she walked. A mysterious envelope passed through the window. But this time, the envelope contained keys to a new arts center for her non-profit, built secretly over the previous year. Consider it a payment, he teased, for 10 years of happiness. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she pulled him close. Some payments, she whispered, can never be calculated in dollars. And as they drove away, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of promise, illuminating a journey that had begun with suspicion and blossomed into something neither could have imagined, a love story orchestrated by fate, family, and a fortuitous misunderstanding. 10 years into their marriage, Sarah and William had built what many would consider a perfect life. Their son Richard was now 5, their charitable foundation was changing thousands of lives, and their love had only deepened with time. But perfection, as Sarah was about to discover, often conceals the most shocking secrets. It began with a letter, much like the one that had started their journey together. Plain envelope, no return address, delivered not by post but slipped under the door of Sarah's office at the foundation. Not everything is as it seems. The payment was just the beginning. Ask about Project Shadowfall. Sarah stared at the cryptic message, her heart racing. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the paper expensive. She immediately called William, but he dismissed her concerns. Probably just someone trying to cause trouble, he said. We've become quite visible with the foundation. Ignore it. But Sarah couldn't shake the unease that settled over her. That night, while William slept, she found herself searching his home office. She'd never done this before. Trust had been their foundation. Yet something about the letter resonated with a part of her that had always wondered if she truly knew the man she'd married. In the false bottom of his desk drawer, she found a thumb drive labeled simply SF. With trembling fingers, she plugged it into her laptop. The files it contained shattered her world in an instant. Project Shadowfall wasn't just a code name, it was an elaborate scheme orchestrated by William and her uncle years before she'd entered the picture. Detailed plans, spreadsheets, and correspondence revealed their true business. They hadn't built their fortune through legitimate investments alone, but through an intricate web of offshore accounts, manipulated markets, and corporate espionage. Global investments had been built on foundations far darker than she could have imagined. And her inheritance? It wasn't a gift of love, but a calculated distribution of funds that couldn't be traced back to their source. Sarah sat frozen, the blue light of the screen illuminating tears she didn't realize were falling. Everything, her marriage, her child's future, the foundation helping so many, was built on fraud and deception. As dawn broke, William found her still at the computer. One look at her face told him everything. Sarah, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain Project Shadowfall? Can you explain how the money that's built our life together was obtained? Her voice was surprisingly steady, even as her world collapsed. William closed his eyes briefly. Your uncle and I, we made choices. Early on, when failure wasn't an option. But everything changed years ago. We've been legitimate for a decade. The foundation, our current investments, it's all clean. But built on dirty money, Sarah whispered. Does anyone else know? The flicker in William's eyes told her everything. The letter, she realized. Someone knows. Someone's threatening us. William nodded grimly. We've been receiving letters for months. You kept this from me too. I was protecting you, he insisted. And Richard? Sarah laughed bitterly. Protecting me by lying about everything our life is built on. Not everything, William said quietly, reaching for her hand. Never about us. What I feel for you, that's the one true thing in my life. Before Sarah could respond, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. The truth deserves to be paid in full. $10 million by midnight, or everything goes public. Instructions to follow. Sarah looked up at her husband, this stranger she thought she knew. What are we going to do? William's expression hardened into something Sarah had never seen before, a glimpse, perhaps, of the man who had built an empire through means she was only beginning to understand. First, we get Richard somewhere safe. Then, we find out who's threatening our family. Over the next 12 hours, Sarah discovered sides of William she'd never known existed: his methodical approach to crisis, his network of contacts with questionable skills, his ability to track digital footprints that should have been untraceable. By evening, they had a name: Marcus Vate, a former employee William and Richard had fired years ago. His plan wasn't simply blackmail, it was vengeance designed to destroy everything they'd built. We can pay him, Sarah suggested as they sat in a hotel room, their son safely away with trusted security. Use some of the Foundation's emergency reserves. William shook his head. He'll never stop. This isn't about money for him, it's about watching us fall. Then what? Turn ourselves in. Destroy everything voluntarily. William hesitated, then spoke words that chilled Sarah to her core. There's another option. One your uncle prepared for, just in case. From his wallet, William extracted a small key. Richard called it the nuclear option. A complete erasure and resurrection. What does that mean? Sarah demanded. It means we disappear. Tonight. New identities, new lives, already established in a place no one would think to look. Your uncle set it up years ago, liquidated assets held in untraceable accounts, properties under layers of shell companies. Sarah stood, backing away from him. You want us to run? To take Richard away from everything he knows? To live a lie for the rest of our lives? We are already living one, William said quietly. The only difference would be knowing it together. Sarah shook her head. There has to be another way. There is, came a voice from the doorway. They both turned to find a woman in her 60s standing there, keycard in hand. Sarah had never seen her before, but William's shocked expression said everything. Catherine, he whispered. How did you? Richard told me where to find the contingency plans if anything ever happened to him, the woman said simply. She turned to Sarah. I'm Catherine Davenport. William's first wife. Sarah felt the room spin. First wife? You told me you'd never been married before. Catherine smiled thinly. One of many lies, I'm afraid. William and I divorced 15 years ago. Just before he and your uncle began their creative business practices. What are you doing here? William demanded. Saving you from yourselves, Catherine replied. I've been watching. Waiting. When Marcus made his move, I knew it was time. She placed a folder on the bed. Inside is everything you need to neutralize Marcus's threat. Bank records proving he embezzled millions before being terminated. Evidence of his own criminal enterprises. Enough to ensure mutual destruction if he exposes you. Why would you help us? Sarah asked, suspicious. Catherine's eyes softened as she looked at Sarah. Not them. You? And your son. Richard was like a brother to me long before he was William's business partner. He made me promise to watch over his family if things ever unraveled. William stared at his ex-wife. You've known everything all along. Not everything, Catherine corrected. But enough. Richard trusted me with the truth when he fell ill, knowing I had no love for you, but would honor my promise to him. Sarah's mind was reeling. So Uncle Rich had contingency plans within contingency plans. Was anything in my life real? Catherine crossed to her, taking her hands. Your uncle loved you genuinely. That was never part of any scheme. And despite his many flaws, she glanced at William, this man does truly love you. That's the only reason I'm here. For hours, the three of them talked. Catherine revealed the full extent of Richard and William's operations, both the illegitimate beginnings and the legitimate enterprise it had evolved into. She explained how Richard had genuinely sought redemption in his final years, channeling funds into the foundation and setting up Sarah's inheritance. He wanted his legacy to be something good, Catherine explained. You and the foundation were his atonement. When dawn broke, they had a plan not to run, not to pay, but to confront. Using Catherine's evidence as leverage, they would meet with Marcus and propose a different kind of payment, immunity in exchange for silence, with the added promise that any attempt to expose William and Sarah would result in his own exposure. The meeting took place at Catherine's estate, neutral ground for all parties. Marcus arrived confident, leaving furious but contained. The threat was neutralized, but Sarah knew their problems were far from over. That night, alone with William for the first time since discovering the truth, Sarah faced the hardest decision of her life. I don't know if I can stay married to you, she admitted. Everything I thought I knew about us was built on lies. William didn't argue. I understand. But before you decide, there's something you should see. He took her to a safety deposit box she'd never known existed. Inside was a journal, her uncle's private thoughts during his final years. He gave this to me the day before he died, William explained. Made me promise not to read it, just to give it to you if the truth ever came out. Alone in their bedroom, Sarah read through her uncle's confessions, his regrets, his hopes for redemption. The final entry, dated just days before his death, brought her to tears. William doesn't know that I've told Catherine everything. A backup plan for my backup plan. If the truth ever emerges, she'll be there to help guide Sarah through the wreckage. I've spent a lifetime calculating risks and returns, but my final calculation is simple: Sarah's happiness is worth any price. She may hate me when she learns the truth, but I hope she understands that people can change. William has. I believe I have too. Too late, perhaps, but change nonetheless. The payment I leave her isn't just money, it's the chance for a better legacy than mine. I hope she finds it in her heart to forgive an old man's sins and recognize that sometimes love grows from the most damaged soil. Sarah closed the journal, her emotions a tempest. The foundation they'd built together had helped thousands. The life they'd created had brought joy and purpose. Was she willing to discard it all because its origins were tainted? 3 days later, she made her decision. She found William in their son's room, watching Richard sleep. I want complete transparency from now on, she said quietly. Every account, every investment, every decision. William looked up, hope and disbelief warring in his eyes. You're staying. I am giving us a chance, she corrected. Not for you, not even for me. For him, and for all the people our foundation helps. But things will change. Over the following year, they rebuilt their marriage on new terms. William stepped down as CEO of Global Investments, focusing instead on the foundation. Sarah took a more active role in their financial affairs, ensuring every investment was not just legal but ethical. Catherine became a regular presence in their lives, a guardian angel of sorts, and eventually a beloved grandmother figure to Richard. The woman William had once deceived became the cornerstone of their redemption. 5 years after the night that nearly destroyed them, Sarah and William renewed their vows in a private ceremony. The words they exchanged were different this time, acknowledging the darkness they'd overcome, the truth they now embraced. Our beginning was built on deception, Sarah admitted in her vows, but our future is built on truth. The payment for past sins isn't just money or power, it's living honestly from this day forward. William, his hair now streaked with grey, responded, "You gave me something I never deserved, a second chance. I promised to spend every day earning it." As they celebrated afterward, Catherine pulled Sarah aside. "Your uncle would be proud. Not of what he and William did, but of what you've made from it." Sarah smiled, watching her son play with friends from the Foundation's programs. In finance, they say you can't transform bad investments into good ones. But maybe with people, it's different. Maybe we can transform ourselves. That night, as they danced under stars that had witnessed both their deception and redemption, William whispered in her ear, "Thank you for mistaking me for a scammer all those years ago." Sarah laughed softly. "Technically, you were one. And now?" She looked into the eyes of the man she'd chosen twice now, once in ignorance and once with full knowledge of his flaws. "Now you're just mine." What had begun as a fraudulent payment had transformed into something genuine, a life rebuilt on transparency, a love strengthened by forgiveness, and a legacy that would outlive them both. As their story continued to unfold, Sarah understood that the greatest inheritance her uncle had left her wasn't wealth or property. It was the opportunity to transform something broken into something beautiful, to take payment for past wrongs and invest it in future rights. And in that transformation lay their true happily ever after. Comment below with what you think should happen in Chapter 3. Should Sarah and William face the consequences of their past, or has their redemption earned them peace? Until next time, remember that sometimes the most valuable payments in life aren't measured in dollars, but in truth and second chances.